If instead of wiki pages you decide to make the older style web part page, you are certainly a bit more limited in the browser-based customization you can do. Again, the default new page is a wiki page, so we create a web part page through More Options. I'll filter by Page and select Web Part Page. Now, the first part of the journey is that you will need to choose a layout before the page is actually created. And unlike the wiki page, this can't be changed later. So I'll give it a name. I can flick through the different layout templates. It gives me a preview over here on the left of what these might look like. I'm just going to choose the header, left column, and body, and then choose where this goes. In this case, I can put it in any of these libraries. Site Assets, Site Pages is fine too. Even though Site Pages is a wiki page library, we can put a web part page in there just fine. And click Create. Now, second, everything that we do on a web part page does need to be contained inside a web part. Now, that's fine when you're doing something like adding a web part that represents a list or library. In fact, let's say here in the body, I'll click to add a web part, and I'll select from my built-in lists and libraries here. I'll just select from, say, the calendar section. And yes, I can choose to add the web part to any of the web part zones that I have. I'm going to say add it to the body. And even though I've added this web part to the body, I could still add another web part to the body here, or one to the header, or one to the left column. Now, here's one of the problems. If I just want to add some textual content, I just want to type in some text in the header, well, what I'll find is there's really no way of doing it. There's no way to type it in. Everything has to be inside a web part. So what I'll need to do here is add a web part like the content editor web part, which I'll find in the media and content section. And the content editor web part really is just a container for some generic content, whatever you want. So we've got this new content editor web part. It says click here to add new content. I will oblige. I click, and now I can actually start typing. Within this web part itself, you actually have a pretty similar experience to editing a section of a wiki page. I have the editing tools up here. I have the alignment tools, styles, and markup styles. I don't get the ability to change the text layout of the page, but I do get the ability to insert, say, an image or another web part. Now, if you need multiple pieces of content, you can have multiple content editor web parts on a page. So if I wanted to add some text over here in the left column, I again would have to go to my media and content section, add another content editor web part to the left column, and then configure it. I can select that text. I can use some of these markup styles, like, say, the colored heading, and do some basic formatting. Now, web parts can also be dragged from one section of the page to another. We can grab this title bar here, and I can actually drag this around and add it to another area, what's called the web part zones. In this case, dragging from the left column zone to the body zone, or from the body zone up into the header zone. You can't drag them anywhere that's not a web part zone. If I try and drag them up here onto the top, I'll get the no entry sign. And back into the left column. Now, web parts, of course, always have this title bar on them turned on by default. So here I've got the calendar. Here I've got Content Editor 1 and Content Editor 2. This is what's referred to as the Chrome of the web part. And it's fine while we're editing, but let's say I go back to my page part of the toolbar and tell it to stop editing and save this. It's not really a problem that I have the calendar Chrome here, but this Content Editor 1 and Content Editor 2 is kind of ugly. So you don't always want to see the Chrome, particularly with simple web parts. It doesn't add anything. So I'm going to switch back into editing this page, because with web parts, and this is true on wiki pages too, you can change the settings of each of them. I first need to select the web part just by clicking somewhere in it so I can see that it's surrounded by the blue box. And then up on the ribbon, I will have the web part tools options section that I can select. Each web part can be configured differently. Each web part has its own settings, what are called the web part properties. So with this one selected, I can jump up here and click the button for web part properties, and it opens up this section on the right hand side, very much identical to the way it used to look in SharePoint 2007. But what I'll find is there's an appearance section that I can expand where I've got information about the Chrome. So is it minimized? Is it normal? What type of Chrome do I have? Default, title and border, title only, border only. I'm going to choose none. Choose that and click OK. Now after clicking OK here, well, I can still see the Chrome for this web part, but that's okay because I'm in edit mode and I want to be able to see that. Otherwise there'd be no way of actually identifying that that web part existed or understanding what that web part was. But when I go back to the page section of the ribbon and I say stop editing, what you're going to find is that content editor web part no longer has the Chrome header to it. Again, I could switch into the edit page mode, select the second one, and basically repeat the same method. Go into web part properties, open up appearance, and change the Chrome type to none. Back to page and save it again. When you're working with web part pages, you do typically lose the quick launch bar, the navigation on the left-hand side. But if you're after maximum real estate, that might be okay. Sure, the page we're looking at right now here is pretty ugly. But in fact, in my course on creating data-driven web pages in SharePoint 2010, I do typically use web part pages because A, I do want maximum screen real estate, and B, I actually want more formality to the layout. Sometimes it's okay that the layout is fixed, and with something like a complex data-driven page, it's not really a plus point to have everybody easily able to edit it. And one last thing about web part pages is that unlike wiki pages, you do not get an option to easily view the page history and compare different versions of it. If you save it in a library that has versions supported, you can actually get to the version information of that page, but you won't get an easy way to compare what's happened to it.